Until next time.
This is Legacy 1891, preserving the past for the future. Welcome back, Vikings and fans of the Elizabeth City State University Vikings. Welcome to the podcast Legacy 1891, where we are focusing on preserving the past for the future. Today, I have a special guest who is actually from the present, and I have here next to me in the studio here, Miss Jayla Williams.
Okay, did you discover anything else that you would like to talk about?
Anything else I like to talk about? Boy, yeah, actually, I will say, and again, I can't go over that all because I said I have 450, and I'm not going to obviously show those today. And this is a podcast, and this is not a television show or anything like that. I did find a lot of awesome stuff, and I was really kind of blown away. A couple of things that I've learned so far, because see, now the point is I have to go back and unpack. I took photos because I wanted to have time to look at them later. Because I'm not going back there for who knows how long, maybe next year. But a couple of things that I uncovered. As I said, one thing I discovered was that, as I said, many prominent Democrats, including future Governor Charles Aycock, were deeply embarrassed about Wilmington. And they were upset that a few radicals were making things look bad, and they didn't support it. So any kind of thinking that all the Democrats in North Carolina supported this kind of violence is, and again, I think that's not hard to believe, because sometimes some people go too far. They get too carried away, and they do dumb stuff that makes everybody look bad, and they don't want that. And so I think that's not surprising. That's the case that I uncovered in some of the letters, because I actually found letters that people wrote about this. I will say this, that this Roundtree account to me shows that Wilmington is a heavily nuanced. In fact, I would love to have sometimes students actually see this Roundtree document to try to figure out what he's trying to say, because it's fascinating, and you wonder, to compare what we think today and what Roundtree says, because again, he was a first-hand bystander who of course had his own biases, no doubt about it. A couple other things I noticed here. I found a couple documents that were literally about the white supremacy clubs. Now, you might say, white supremacy clubs, that sounds really weird. It sounds disturbing. And it to us, we as well we should. But the fact is that 1898 to 1900, there were clubs that were literally called white supremacy clubs. They were established and supported by a Burt T. County Democrat named Francis Winston, whose brother was the former president of UNC Chapel Hill, and later on became president of the University of Texas. So prominent intellectuals here at work. These clubs were about getting voters interested in voting for the Democratic Party. And what they did is they used race baiting. They try to scare voters into thinking that if you don't vote for the Democrats, the blacks are taking over all your political positions. They're taking away all your jury positions. They're taking away all your jobs. And of course, that was, again, just mythology. And some of the papers I know mention that it is mythology. They knew that it was a lie back then, but they just wanted to use that lie, what they knew was a lie, to win votes. But there were clubs. And there was one flyer that I thought was fascinating. I took a picture of this flyer. It was like a poster, like we see posters here on the studio wall, what's coming up. This is kind of like a poster about this upcoming barbecue. And the point was, we're going to have a pig barbecue, literally the whole pig roast. I don't know if you've ever seen those before. Have you ever seen those at weddings? Or yeah, the whole pig roast. Sure, they had one of those, and they said, bring your ladies with you. This is a family-friendly event, and we're going to have a good time. But it was all about getting people interested in voting and getting people. So they did a lot of that. So again, we call these things kind of political rallies. And I still have seen in North Carolina, I've seen politicians have like barbecues or fish fries. I don't know, have you seen that before? Somewhat politicians sometimes?
Yes.
A little bit, sometimes. Yeah, so it was a case back then. But even that surprised me. I literally saw I saw one letter that really struck me. It was about the whole idea that, well, we need to help local whites with jobs. If somebody's unemployed, we need to find a way to get them a job, as long as, of course, they're part of us, they support us. So the thinking was, well, if we help somebody get a job, they're going to be more likely to be loyal to the party. And so there was almost kind of like a semi-unofficial jobs program, per se. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. There's so much. There's one thing, I also had time. There's actually a lot of governor's materials, a lot of governor's papers. Of course, every governor has papers. Mm-hmm. And there were papers from past governors. Many of these governors had been out in public, stumping, giving speeches for white supremacy back in 1898. And they became party leaders, and then some of them became elected governor. One of them was Charles Brantley Aycock, the so-called education governor. Another one was a man named Locke Craig. I saw Locke Craig's inaugural address. Now, this was, you mean by inaugural address? Were you there? Chancellor had his inauguration?
Yes.
And you heard he had a speech and all that. And, of course, he prepared that in advance. He's been working on that probably since he was hired. So this is a big deal. But I really read Governor Craig's unpublished inaugural address. Literally, it was written in cursive. And I don't know if he read that per se, but this was I think it was written, and it was a speech, and it was extensive, and he literally specifically talked about black normal schools, and he explained how they were important, but again, it was important to him because these schools need to be here, so it teaches black citizens certain things that they need to know. But you sense here that these schools were not seen by the governor and early governors as a place where people can learn academic subjects. It was more or less, we need to have schools to make people to be good citizens. They need to know how to read. They need to know how to write. Nothing advanced. No, no Latin, no major difficult, no calculus, nothing that we would consider today to be an academic education. But he specifically, and that was surprising to see that. What also surprised me, when I was looking for the bills, when I found Hugh Cale's bill, I first looked in 1898, because that was my focus, was 1898. And I looked through the bills, I looked through the legislative materials, and this was a folder, and it was just full of old paper. This was, again, 1898, so almost 130 years old. And this consisted of some proposed bills that never got anywhere, and some of them became law. Well, I looked at them chronologically. That's how they were. They opened in early January, and as you might expect, the first ones are the ones that are the most important. The ones that we want to get out. We want to get this out now. They've been waiting for this. The very first one, can you guess what the very first bill was that I saw? Can you take a guess what it was about?
No, I have no clue.
Well, what'd you learn about Jim Crow from Professor Moore?
Okay, so during the different elections, they brought about these different rules, I guess you could say, things such as like literacy tests, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses, which
Correct.
Gave way for some people to vote, but obviously the literacy rate for African Americans was tremendously low at the time. So they were legal laws, quote unquote, but they were very discriminatory in their practice.
And even, yes, and I would also add on that is that many of those who were appointed to be the ones who guarded the voting rolls discriminated against educated blacks. What about separate facilities? Remember what you learned about separate facilities, segregated facilities? Remember which facilities were in North Carolina? You recall which facilities were segregated, separated?
Things were segregated. Like Movies, schools, public spaces, water fountains, train stations.
Train stations, and therefore what else? Train stations and what else?
Bus stations.
And trains?
Yes,
trains
and trains as well, because the sections that were for whites were bigger, more spacious. They had bathrooms, places to smoke. In regard to African Americans, their spaces were smaller, obviously. There was no lounging areas on the trains for African Americans, and their places to store their luggage was tremendously much smaller than those of the white cars.
Yeah. Did Dr. Moore talk about when this Jim Crow laws, separate schools were back in 1860s, and both blacks and whites in the General Assembly supported that. But I'm talking here about the first Jim Crow laws. When you recall when Jim Crow really started in North Carolina?
I would say around about like literally right after the slaves were freed, they began to make
schools.
like the foundation for Jim Crow.
The schools. But I would say this, the 1898 election was a very key part in the institutionalization of Jim Crow in North Carolina. And again, there were separate schools back to the 1860s. Both wanted it that way. And it's because that black educators thought that we're best equipped to teach black students, because that's a debate that continues to linger on. But one thing I noticed is this 1898 legislature that was elected in 1898. The first bill, one of the very first bills that was drafted, literally the very front of the first folder, was about segregated railway cars. Segregated railway cars. So this was to them top priority. So it must have been something that was really compelling, and of course it passed. That was one of those bills that passed no problem, and so for the number of decades to come, that's how it was. And of course, as you also know, that it was supposed to be separate but equal, and they focused on the separate part, and of course the equal part was a complete
fail,
cruel joke. Because sometimes you can actually see the priorities of a legislature by looking at the bills. Absolutely. And again, many of these did not go anywhere. One that did not go anywhere, and this may surprise you, but one that was proposed right away but did not go anywhere, was a bill that would separate school funds by race. The thinking was, well, we already have separate schools, so let's separate taxpayer dollars. And so, like, only black taxpayer dollars go to black schools. Now, the reality is that although there were a number of free blacks, specifically in eastern North Carolina, most blacks in North Carolina had definite roots in slavery. Many of them had just been decades free. They had many of them did not have enough funds they worked on the farm. They worked as sharecroppers. They didn't have money for taxes, so the fact is the pool for black schools would have been almost nothing. But that was the bill that was proposed, one of the very first ones. It never was passed, and the reason I think why was because Charles Brantley Aycock, and I know that he's done this, and this people tried to keep this bill passed all throughout the years to come, but Aycock believes it was wrong, and he said, no, we're not doing that. In fact, I do know that Governor Aycock said, if you pass this in the legislature, I'm going to quit. I'm not allowing that. I'm going to quit. If you override my veto, I'm going to quit. Because it was just, and of course, it didn't make it. But some people tried. Some people desperately tried, and it just didn't work out here. Also, I noticed here, and I think we have a little time to talk about this. I talked about the petitions. And there were petitions from other districts, other parts of the county, other counties, other parts of North Carolina. Many of them were from counties in eastern North Carolina. I found one from Edgecombe County, from black citizens, and they wanted to have a state-supported normal school themselves because they had apparently learned how well the other ones were doing, and they wanted that for themselves. And as we all know, that didn't work out. But something else is fascinating. You know where Hereford is?
Yes.
You been to Hereford before?
Yes.
Not Hereford County, but Hereford, Perquimans County.
Yes.
It's not that far away, is it?
It's like 15 minutes.
How would you compare Hereford and Elizabeth City to our listeners?
Hereford is smaller than Elizabeth City. It's much more tighter than Elizabeth City, I can say. Things there are closer because Elizabeth City is not big. Like, Elizabeth City is not like a big city, but Hereford is smaller, much smaller than Elizabeth City is. Yeah. And there, I would say, I've been to like the town part of Hereford, and I've also been like in the rural part of Hereford. They look completely different.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's a nice town, but it's a lot smaller than us, right? They don't have, obviously, we have a Walmart. They don't have a Walmart.
Right.
We have like 3 Subways. I think they might have 1. It's not, I mean, it's a cute town, and they have some nice stuff there. But can you imagine this campus being in Hereford?
No.
There was a petition in 1899. There was a petition I found from the citizens of Hereford. They wanted to move this school to Hereford. And they explained why they wanted it moved. And guess what happened, of course? Nothing.
It didn't happen.
Nothing happened. They were like, no, we're not moving the school. Because this school was doing fine as it was. And even back then, this town was a lot bigger than Hereford.
Yes.
And so it's fascinating. But what strikes me is a lot of the petitions were about, we want that school over there. We want that school. We want them to move here. Because we didn't have any permanent buildings back then. We were renting buildings every year. We were kind of like, every year was like, okay, we still going to be around next year? And so we didn't know until really early 1900s. By 1905, we finally knew that this was going to be a permanent campus. They were going to eventually, because we had some land. There was going to be land to build. And this what struck me as these petitions from people who really, so that I guess shows me that there was a thirst for education. Education is very important to people. Education is, it was important to us today, and it's important to people back then. I think that is, I think that's striking. I think it impressed me. These petitions, and I've seen many other petitions. And I need to go back. I need to go back to ones I missed. I didn't get to all of them because I ran out of time. I ran out of gas, and you know how it goes. After a while, like I have to drive 3 hours home. I need to get home because have you been out to Raleigh? Okay, so you know it's a nice drive, but it gets long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, especially from Elizabeth City. It's a little shorter distance from my hometown, but to Elizabeth City, that's a good drive.
Have you ever been there during rush hour traffic?
Yes.
So you know what I mean.
Yes.
I want to get home.
Trying to get back around 4 or 5 o'clock in the daytime, you're gonna get stuck.
So you can understand why I left at 3:30.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if I leave at 5 o'clock,
5 o'clock traffic.
I get home
terrible.
in the dark.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get home in the dark. So I thought, I'm done. I'm finished. I am kaput. So that was that. And again, so much more I have to unpack, and it's exciting, and hopefully I can share more things in future podcasts.
I have one more question for you to end the podcast since we need to wrap this up. The tagline for this podcast is preserving the past for the future. Archives do a wonderful job of preserving the past so that today the past can be rediscovered. Could you tell us about archives, and do you know if anyone can do what you did and get permission to enter an archive and discover it for themselves? What are some tips you could share with our listeners?
Well, let me ask you this. I'm glad you asked that because anybody can go to an archive. But let me ask you this, Jayla. Why do you think somebody who's not a professional historian would go to an archive? What could you find in an archive?
Pictures, newspaper articles, family trees.
Family trees.
You can genuinely find anything. A lot of things that you might want to know about history is probably somewhere in somebody's archives. And archives are not just like, it doesn't just have to be like state archives or like university archives. Archives can be at your grandmother's house. The pictures that they took way back when, those are archives. So like just going through and like actually looking for certain things, you can definitely find them in archives.
Absolutely. We talked about family records. If someone wants to look for the family tree, what materials, can you think of some materials that an archive might have, a statewide archive would have, that would help maybe understand like when somebody was kind of someone's major milestones in life? What kind of things do you think they'd be in there?
I think I would say like newspaper articles.
Newspapers.
It depends on like who the person is or like what they did, I guess you could say, because they might just have like, depending on what their job was or what their life looked like, they may have their own place in an archival like setting, because for different people, I know this because of Elizabeth City State Archives, there are archives of like SGA president correspondence. So
Absolutely.
like you can find like maybe different emails people may have sent, different letters, pictures, especially if you have a name of somebody, like a specific name, you can look for that specific name and like things that dealt with that person during the era in which you're looking for.
Do you think if someone went to find about you, do you think they'd find some things about Jayla Williams in the archive?
Maybe.
Or in the state records?
Maybe.
Where were you born?
Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Okay. When you were born, you remember what they gave your parents?
My birth certificate.
Yeah. You think, and that comes from?
Archive.
That's from the state.
Yeah.
So that goes to the archives. So if someone wants to one day look into your life and say, okay, when was Jayla Williams born? They can go and find out birth certificate.
Wow. I did
Marriage
not know
certificate.
That.
Death certificate. I'm not going to go there yet. You're young, a lot younger than me. I know we would go there, but you know what I'm saying here. But so my point I'm saying that, the reason why I'm asking you this, or the reason why I kind of raise that issue, is that I would guess probably half the people I see in the archives, and it's not a lot of people, half the people are not professionals. They are there. They're not graduate students. They're not professional historians who have jobs at universities. They are people from any walk of life. They want to learn about their grandmother or their great-grandmother, their grandfather who fought in World War II. They want to see service records. They want to see birth certificates. They want to see marriage. And some of these, again, go back centuries, and you can literally find microfilm of each county has this kind of data. And that's just a start. So that will be one place to start. But again, if you visit an archive, one on campus is a lot smaller than the ones that I was at. But it's always good to know exactly what you want to look at. Archives generally have an online catalog, and it's sometimes hard to figure out where things are. So you have to plan in advance. And so when I went there, and when I always go to archives, I have a list of materials I want to look at. When I go to UNC, to the Wilson Library, they have an online order entry, and they want you to order stuff 2 days in advance. So they know exactly what you want. And so when I showed up there, they had all my stuff on a cart. They had all there. I could just get the boxes off the cart, and I didn't have to waste any time at all. That was great. That was beautiful. Saved me a lot of time. And I had a cart. I had like a whole full cart, like 3 levels of a cart, and each of them has a box about 6 inches wide. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew which folder to look for. For example, when I looked at Marion Butler's papers, Marion Butler was a U.S. Senator, 6-year term. So you imagine all the letters he received even back then.
Yes.
Just imagine how many emails our state legislatures receive. I don't know if they save all the emails, but I bet there was enough of them out there. So going through those, but I was looking for certain folders about certain things. And when someone wrote to Senator Butler about some shenanigans that were happening at the polls, one thing that surprised me, those kind of details. But you have to plan in advance, because there's no way I could have just said, okay, I'm going to see what's in here. I was hoping to find things from a certain period in a certain folder, and that saved me time. So you got to know what you're looking for. But there's certain kinds of protocol when you visit an archive. And when you visit professional archives, say like the state archives, they want you to use only pencil, no pens. Can you guess why they don't want you to use pens?
So you don't get the ink on the different documents.
Have you ever had a pen break before?
Yes.
You ever had ink on your hands from the pen?
Ink will go everywhere.
So just
smear and
yeah. Yeah. You don't want to have that
Right,
ink.
exactly.
You don't want to have 2026 ink on 1898 papers. No. Follow procedures. They want you to, you're allowed to bring in digital cameras, which I have a special digital camera. You could also take them off your camera phone and just be respectful. And one folder generally it's the state archives. They want one box at a time. They can't keep ordering boxes, and so they just get you more stuff and such. But it's simply just, and of course you have to be quiet. And there are people doing some serious research there, and they're there to help. What strikes me about times is they want people to actually enjoy the archives. They want people to feel free to learn. People who work in the archives are historians, or at least they've been trained in history. They like what they do. They love talking about it. So if you have a question, many times I'm surprised what I learn. Someone pointed out to me, they have an old card catalog. You ever seen a card catalog? You never seen a card catalog?
I don't think so.
Oh my goodness. But it tells you, wow, tells you how much time has passed. Yeah, when I was your age, I had seen nothing but card catalogs. They have all the stuff there on the card catalog, like a big wall, a wall of card catalogs. And, well, not everything is on the card catalog, but a lot of things are. And they have these things called finding aids. Researchers come up with, sometimes it's 30 pages or 40 pages long, or even longer than that, of a finding aid tells you what is in this massive collection. And so you can sometimes say, okay, I bet I might want to check this section out. So you have to plan. You have to plan, but the thing about it is if you plan ahead, you can be more efficient with your time, and that gives you more time to make tremendous discoveries and discoveries that change how we view the past. Do you have any other questions for me? I know we're getting short on time here.
I do not have any other questions.
Are you okay? Well, I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your time. And listeners, Vikings, fans of Vikings, once again, this has been Legacy 1891. Professor Glen Bowman from Elizabeth City State University, at a place where we focus on preserving the past for the future. Thank you very much.